And now, welcome to this session.
This workshop demonstrates how GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT can streamline software development, from code generation and completion, to problem solving and debugging, enhancing productivity and code quality throughout the development process. Our next speaker is a 20-year veteran in secure software development, a former 10-year Microsoft MVP, and a certified public accountant. When he's not leading digital transformations, he enjoys assembling unmanned aerial vehicles. Please welcome the founder of Fluent Site Technologies, Mr. Alan Spartacus Manune.
Good evening. So before I start, let me share you what my ad hoc setup in my living room. So just imagine, me sitting in front of the laptop and that big monitor. So, welcome to this workshop, to this session, Painless Software Design and Development with GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT. My name is Alan, and I'll be guiding you through how these AI-powered tools can transform your software development process. During this session, we'll explore how GitHub Copilot can help automate code writing in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, and how ChatGPT used as a standalone tool in the browser, which can assist with debugging, code reviews, providing design advice. So by the end of this session, you'll have a clear understanding of how to integrate these tools into your development workflow, making writing code more efficient and less error-prone. So before we dive into the tools, let's take a moment to talk about some common challenges we face in software development, especially for .NET developers. First, we often deal with increasingly complexity of .NET projects. So even other software written in other languages like Ruby or Python, right? So as our projects grow, managing the code base becomes harder and prone to errors. Next, there could be an issue of time-consuming, repetitive code tasks, right? So you keep on writing the same line of code with difference in variable names, for instance. So writing boilerplate code or implementing common patterns can slow us down. Another major challenge is troubleshooting and maintaining performance, right? So bugs can be tricky to identify and fix, especially in large applications. Finally, integrating, for instance, a front end framework like Angular with .NET for full stack development can add extra layers of complexity when managing front end and back end code. So these are exactly the kind of challenges that AI-powered tools like GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT can help alleviate. So now that we have covered the challenges, let's talk about how AI-powered tools can help solve these problems. So tools like GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT can bring AI into the development process, making it easier to automate repetitive tasks and improve overall code quality. So for instance, Copilot can automate code completion and suggest best practices, allowing developers to write code faster and with fewer errors. So meanwhile, ChatGPT can analyze and troubleshoot code, so helping with debugging, refactoring, and offering advice on code architecture. So together, these tools are designed to make your development process more efficient, and they integrate smoothly in both .NET and Angular workflows, for instance. So by automating mundane tasks and providing intelligent code suggestions, AI can help you focus on solving the more complex problems in your project. So here's what we'll cover in this today's session. So first, we'll start with an overview of the GitHub Copilot, and then explaining what it is and how it integrates into your workflow, particularly in Visual Studio 2022 and Visual Studio Code. Next, we'll dive into ChatGPT, exploring how it complements Copilot by providing deeper insights into code debugging and optimization, especially when used as a standalone tool in the browser. Then we look at how these tools can be used together to supercharge your development process, combining Copilot's code generation with ChatGPT's code review and optimization. And after that, I'll show you a demo of both tools in action, using Copilot to generate code and ChatGPT to troubleshoot and optimize the code generated by Copilot. And this will include both the .NET and Angular examples if we have time. So finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A session to address any questions you have and discuss practical way to integrate these tools into your own development workflow. Okay, let's begin with GitHub Copilot. So Copilot is an AI-powered tool developed by GitHub in collaboration with OpenAI. So it works as an intelligent assistant that integrates directly into your code editor, which supports Visual Studio 2022 and Visual Studio Code. And Copilot helps developer by suggesting entire lines of or blocks of code as you type. So based on the context of what you're writing. So it is powered by OpenAI's Codal model or Codex model, which has been trained on millions of code repositories, meaning it can generate relevant code for a wide range of programming languages and frameworks, including .NET and Angular. So Copilot not only helps with auto-completing code, but it can also help generate boilerplate code, suggest best practices, and even help with repetitive tasks, saving you time and reducing coding errors. It's like having an AI-powered pair programmer, right? That works alongside with you in real time. All right, so now let's take a closer look. Let's take a closer look at some of the key features of GitHub Copilot that makes it a game changer for developers. First, auto-completion of code snippets. So as you start typing, Copilot predicts the next line of code, whether it's a method, a class, or even the entire method or function. Copilot is great for generating boilerplate code. For instance, if you're working on a .NET API in Visual Studio 2022, Copilot can help scaffold the controllers, services, repository layers automatically. Even if you say that or you're indicating to the Copilot that you're writing your code with CQRS pattern, so it will basically write all of that for you. It's equally useful for front-end development in Visual Studio Code. So for instance, if you're writing code with Angular, Copilot can really help you with component scaffolding and setting up routing and services and other stuff, inside the Angular project. So one of the best things about Copilot is its ability to suggest best practices. So as you write code, it incorporates well-known patterns and standards from public code bases, helping ensure your code follows best practices. So overall, Copilot speed up development by reducing repetitive tasks, freeing you up to focus on more complex logic and problem solving. Okay, so I will be doing a demo on how to use Copilot in Visual Studio. And I will basically create a .NET Core API. So basically, I will start with creating, a couple of classes and entities and some code for accessing database. And then I will end it with, if I still have time, I will end it with creating controllers for get, post, put, and delete functions. for ASP.NET Web API. You will also see Copilot automatically generate code for dependency injection and repository, which can be used for repository patterns, or if you're using a service layer, we will be asking Copilot to help us generate the code we need in order for us to speed up the writing of the source code. Another great feature that Copilot can provide us is that it understands the context of your code. So as you start typing, let's say you're trying to work on a particular method, it will suggest some code base on the structure of the API following the REST principles. Okay, so let me now work you with opening my Visual Studio. So just give me a second to open Visual Studio. Just give me a second, guys. There you go. So as you can see, this is a Visual Studio, and then I already have created a couple of things using the GitHub Copilot. So GitHub Copilot is basically an extension to Visual Studio, and it can also be installed as an extension to Visual Studio Code. So let me show you what I have in Solution Explorer. So as you can see, I have here, several projects following the clean code architecture, right? So we have the layer for API, we have the layer for core, which contains our entities and other, probably other code that that deals with the business rules of your application. And then we also have a project for code application, which contains several interfaces that will be used for repositories, services, and also the service layer of our application. Finally, we have the project for infrastructure. Here we can add code for data access and other code that deals with third-party system. So I already have started doing this by adding a couple of classes. Basically, we have the customer class, inventory item. So Copilot produced this code for us. We also have the sales order. We also have the sales order line item. So I will start with customer, and then let's say we don't have the exact specification for what would be the properties of the customer, and I will just ask Copilot. Let's say I want you to create a customer. Give me a customer class with 10 common properties. And by the way, my laptop has a 36 gig of memory. So if you want to use Copilot, you probably would like to have a bit highly spec laptop. So let's just copy that. All right. The way I do this in the real world, whenever I ask Copilot to produce something for me, I don't really copy the whole thing, right? And then I don't let Copilot edit my file directly from because Copilot can also modify your source code directly. I don't do that. Based on my experience, it messes up with my project. So I will stick to talking to GitHub Copilot using the this window. So there. So it says customer. So basically we added a customer there, and then another item here that is missing, then went the sales order. So we start with sales order line item. So let's say I ask it again, sales order line item class with 10 common properties. All right. So make sure you're typing, because it only understands that the way I understand it. It only understands English language. So make sure that your English is a bit correct whenever you are asking for it to produce something for you. Otherwise, it will produce wrong code for you. So it's kind of like a garbage in, garbage out. So I have this already created. So there. And then you can try to build your project and see if it's okay. And then finally you say, I want the sales order with 10 common properties. But in the real world, usually we already have a design specifications, right? And those classes might contain already the right properties, and therefore you just feed it with those information. Okay, so there. All right. So next is for you to, before you even write your code for infrastructure, probably you probably want the Copilot to produce the DTO, right? So because we are using a service layer, you don't pass a the DTO to the repository layer. You pass the entities to that, correct? But when you are passing data back to the controller, they are probably be in the form of DTOs, right? So let's say we ask sales order DTO, and then it will produce that the code for you. You measure whether or not it's faster to write the code by hand or just ask the Copilot to do that for you. Sales order DTO. Okay, you can also, whenever you are adding, asking it to create a class for you, for instance, you can always insert a new file into your project. But I prefer to, to create the class by hand. Okay, so let me add another class here. Let's say it's sales order. Line item video, right? So click add. And then say, I want you to complete this for me, dude. So if your machine is 16 gig, it will slow down a bit. So you would probably prefer to do this using the ChatGPT, which I'm going to show you later, a little later. Okay, so we have we already have the sales line item report. So let's define this as a public class. And then after this, we have to start working with our interface, correct? So I'm going to start with I sales order repository. So I repository, and then define this as public, and then I'll just copy this. Okay, I might not be able to complete the whole thing, but the idea here is for you to be able to to get a good understanding of what we are doing whenever we are pairing with a GitHub Copilot. So we have this code written already for us. We have the iSales order repository. Let's see what it did for us. So good. So it added a number of async functions, right? And then I asked it to create, the comments, right? So how many of you are actually writing code without comments, correct? So with with Copilot, you can ask it to comment everything that you write in your code with without really spending a lot of time writing those comments. Just review the comments created by its Copilot. All right, so after this, we can start working now with our repository, right? So the repository layer is basically under the infrastructure. So data, then click the repositories. Okay, so after that, I'm gonna say, I'm going to create now the sales order repository. Okay, but before I finish this up with Copilot, let us say that we have the code, the abstract class or base class for the repository. So let's say we have repository base, And for simplicity, we're gonna say that this will just hold the ID. So you have the public let's say int or long maybe ID. Okay, and then they created, they modified, and then what else? Sorry for the spelling. And then finally, let's say we are soft deleting the record, right? So public is boolean is deleted, right? And then get set. But I can always ask ChatGPT to or GitHub Copilot. I'm sorry to do this for us. Okay, so I can define now my sales order repository. Okay, and then repository base, and then I sales order. Okay, let's see what happens here. So show potential, add reference to the application, and there you go. And basically, we want to go back to the repository layer and say, I want you to improve this. By adding the iLogger. Okay, we will not do that. Yeah, iLogger only. Okay, so we can even require it to because this is a protected method. You can say protected. Just just for conversation with protected should be should start with a capital letter, for instance, right? So it will remember it. So there, so I can copy this, and then I can improve this. Okay. Be careful with copying and pasting because we want to make sure that you are only copying the code that you need. I've seen a lot of people doing copy and paste whenever they use it, and it basically create a lot of problem with their code. So if you have that kind of error, you can try to say fix this. So what I'm doing here is I'm showing you how to ask chat or GitHub Copilot to fix the problem if you're lazy, for instance, or do not have the ability to fix it in less than a minute, for instance. Okay, so I think we need to install the find this. Okay, so there you go. So after that, you go back to your code, and then go to sales order repository and all of that, and then please complete this because you don't have time to. Please complete this code. And then you can even say body, for instance, and then try to log it out. And then as you can see, it forgot to to comment out to add comments to the function. So let's say add comments. Right, so that's much better than not having any comment at all, right? So copy that. Again, when you have already a completed code and then you're just modifying the source code, make sure that you are not copying the whole thing. Just need to compare the generated code with the existing one, and then just grab the code that you need from the chat with the Copilot, right? So there, so you have that written already. Next is we need to go back to the interface and create the interface for the service layer. So you say sales order service, right? And then you're gonna have this public, and then you say it's iService B. No. It's going to be iSales order service. You can decide to have a code, a base class for the sales order service, but you don't need to do that. I'm not going to do that here. So what are we missing here? Hold on. Oh, we are doing an interface. Sorry about that. So let me rewrite this. So public interface sales order interface. There you go. So now I'm going to ask it to create a couple of, that's what we called boilerplating, right? So what it did was basically say public interface sales order service, and then it created all of that. But I'm not interested in doing that. So I will be placing it here. And then please add comments. There. Okay, so imagine in the past, we are asked to create comments for our code, and it will take a lot of time for us to finish it. But here, you can create all of that comments by just telling the Copilot to do that for us. Okay, so after that, if you look our code, it says there sales order DTO, and basically it's done already, right, for us. So next is let's try to build this. And see if there are errors. So far, so good. If I'm doing this alone, probably I'm already done, and I can move on to the next class. So we're going to create now the sales order service. Sales order service. Then make it public, and then inherit from iSales order service, right? And then I'm gonna say, I want you to complete this. And then you need to check what code it generated, because we are interested into doing what we call mapping, right? So there must be mapping here. So as you can see, it is doing the mapping, right? So we are returning DTOs, but we are passing entities to the repository layer. Okay, so let me copy this code so that we can check if okay, we can always go back to our, oops, sorry about that. And what we did here, check what we did in the repository layer. Okay, so as you can see, the repository layer created the wrong code for us, right? So the repository layer is actually, using the DTO. So we will go back to our repository layer, and then we will tell the ChatGPT, okay, please correct the code. Entities. Okay, and then we copy and then replace this. All right, so I think that's good. And then we just import the namespace. There you go. All right, so we have to go back to the repository layer. So as you can see, it's very easy to make changes if you commit some mistakes in your code. But obviously, you have to, make sure that whenever you are creating code, you are actually, checking the syntax created by Copilot before you even say that you're done with that particular part of your code. Please correct this code. Okay, so make sure that as I mentioned earlier, you make sure that you are really checking the code created by Copilot so that you don't really need to do what I just did here. Okay, so it is now returning entities and obviously accepting entities also. So we go back to our code and let's check our sales order line item and see. So it is accepting or returning BTO, accepting BTO, which is good. And we just need to probably reference the namespace, and that's it. So this one, the mapper, we need that. We need to install that. Okay, so obviously there are other parts of the code that needs to be configured, like for instance, the mapping profile, right? So you need to do that also. But in the interest of time, I will not go to that. And then we are almost finished with writing the code for the sales order. So we have to go to the API layer. This is my API layer, and then from there I can say I have here a file. I want you to create a file. Let's say the name here is sales order controller, right? And then we say copy that and then feed Copilot with the syntax and then let it figure how to complete that based on the other stuff that it created for us. So there we have that created for us. And then replace this. Let's see if we have everything. Oops. Okay, so we have to reference that and then okay, we still need to reference okay, let me build this before I run the project. Okay, what's this? Okay, so as you can see, the code it created is it uses the repository layer directly, right? It's wrong, correct? Because we are supposed to be using the sales order service, right? So we're gonna say copy. So the idea here, the way I'm doing this demo is for you to to understand how we could use Copilot to generate the code and also how we use it to fix the problem in our code. So you say the controller must use the sales order service, not the sales order repository. I just asked it to, to add some comments to our API or to our endpoints. Okay, so that's basically it. Let me paste this here so we could inspect the code written for us. Okay, so as you can see, it's still using the sales order repository. We're gonna say, so what we can do here maybe is we remove this, right? And then we say iSales order service. There, and then we can inject this instead of the repository layer. Copy that and paste it there. And then use this. Copy that and paste it here. And then let's see if it will now, please complete this. Okay, I think it creates the correct syntax now. Okay, here. Sometimes you really need to help it, understand what you're trying to accomplish, right? So there, so I have this, I told it, okay, use the ISO sales order service, not the ISO sales order repository, and then inject it in the constructor, and then complete the code. So I can write all of this by hand, but I'm so lazy and I want to, to produce a lot of things in less time, right? So the idea here is for you to have a very good understanding of, how to write software and understanding of clean architecture, and you're good to go. Okay, so you can also use, you can also use Visual Studio Code to continue editing your project, right? So there's also here an extension that would allow you to basically continue adding any functionalities in your source code. So let us say that we're going to have uh, a DTO for the customer, right? So let's see if it can create the DTO for the customer. Let's feed it first with the entity, so that you are training it to understand what you have. Okay, entity is customer. So you say, this is my customer entity. Okay, say create a DTO based on the customer class. Okay, let me show you the my another screen. Sorry, I failed to share this a little earlier before I started working on this one. So as I was saying earlier, you can also use Visual Studio Code to continue, updating your source code. So what I did earlier, I copied the syntax of my customer entity and then fed it to the Copilot. And then I told it, I want you to create, if you look at my prompt here, I want you to create a DTO based on the customer class. And then I gave it the syntax of the customer class. And then it gave me the syntax that I want. So I can just copy the whole thing here. So I can copy the whole thing here because there's nothing here except for the customer DTO class, right? So copy that and then go to the DTO and then create a new file. And then you're gonna say this is customer DTO.cs, right? And then there you go. So there. So those are basically the things that you can do in terms of using the Copilot. So you can use Copilot in Visual Studio 2022. You can also use the Copilot in Visual Studio Code. In Visual Studio Code, you may not only create source code with Copilot for C# or .NET. You can also use this for, let's say, you're building a software using Ruby on Rails, or you're building a software using let's say, a Python. Yeah, you just need to add the extensions needed for you to build those systems. Okay, so that's my demo for GitHub Copilot. Let me continue with my presentation, and hold on. Let me share my screen again. Just this. All right. So, what are the key takeaways from using the GitHub Copilot? So, now that we've seen GitHub Copilot in action, let's summarize some of the key takeaways, right? So, first, Copilot significantly speed up repetitive coding tasks, right? So, as you've seen, right? So, uh, that's basically, if I did that on my own without talking while coding, probably in like 10 minutes, I'm done already with all of that syntax that I wrote earlier. So Copilot significantly speed up your repetitive coding tasks, right? Whether you're working on the back end Visual Studio 2022, or you're building something in Visual Studio Code, the Copilot helps you write your code faster by auto-completing code snippets or generating the boilerplate, where you can even interact with the Copilot so that it will understand what you are trying to accomplish, right? It is not just about speed. Remember, Copilot also helps you ensure consistency across your project. uh, the Copilot follows best practices. You just tell it what you want to do, and then it will give you something that is based on best practices. You can even ask about something like, if it produces something or source code for you. You ask it if it's based on the best practice, and then it will provide you with um, certain things in terms of telling you whether or not the code that provided to you are based on best practice. So Copilot reduces the need for writing repetitive code manually, allowing you to focus on core logic and more complex aspects of your project. And finally, it integrates seamlessly with both Visual Studio 2022 and Visual Studio Code, so that you can use it in your preferred development environment without any disruption to your workflow, right? So with this benefits in mind, let's move on to ChatGPT and see how it can complement the Copilot to further enhance your development process. So what is ChatGPT? So ChatGPT is basically a go-to tool for debugging your code, uh, for code reviews, and providing design advice. So ChatGPT is an AI-powered conversational tool developed by OpenAI, and it can assist you by answering coding questions, reviewing your code, suggesting improvements. And one of the key advantages of ChatGPT is its flexibility. You can use it as a standalone tool in a browser or even in your mobile, making it easy to switch between coding and consulting ChatGPT without leaving your development environment. And ChatGPT helps with more in-depth analysis of your code, as you will see later on, and making it ideal for tasks like explaining design patterns, resolving complex bugs, and optimizing code performance. You can use ChatGPT to understand error messages, refactor your code, and get recommendations for best practices in both .NET and Angular projects, for instance. So in short, our GitHub Copilot helps generate code. ChatGPT assists with understanding and refining it, and making it an ideal complement to Copilot in your development workflow. So let's explore some of the key features of ChatGPT and how it can help improve your development process. So one of the primary functions is providing real-time code reviews. You can paste your code into ChatGPT, for instance, and it will analyze it for potential issues, suggest optimization, and recommend refactoring strategies. ChatGPT is also excellent at debugging assistance. If you encounter, let's say, a bug or an error message, you can ask ChatGPT to help you troubleshoot the issue, and it will provide step-by-step guidance on how to resolve it. For more complex architecture decision, ChatGPT can recommend best practices and design patterns. So for instance, if you're working on a .NET Core application, it can advise whether you should implement the repository pattern or the CQRS pattern. It also use it is also useful for performance optimization, and ChatGPT can help identify bottlenecks in your source code and suggest ways to improve responsiveness or load time. So overall, ChatGPT is an invaluable resource for providing deeper insights into your code and offer practical advice on how to improve the overall quality and performance of your application. Okay, so let me now share you my ChatGPT user interface. Okay, so what I will do here is I will going to give it specifications, if you will. So I will prompt it with a couple of things. Um, Maybe I'm gonna show you briefly what I'm going to give it so that you will be able to understand what I'm going to work with this tool. Hold on. So let me show you something. I wrote something here. Okay, so this is my very basic specification. So I'm going to tell it, I'm going to build a .NET Core project following clean architecture principles. And it will involve a couple of things: sales order line item, inventory, customer. And I wanted to structure the project with 4 layers. We have the core layer, we have the infra layer, core layer, and also if it will give us, some guidance in terms of using the repository pattern and probably the CQRS, right? So let me now switch you over to ChatGPT. Okay, so what I will do is just copy and paste my prompt to ChatGPT so that I can start the conversation. So as you can see, um, I'm using the ChatGPT 4.0 with Canvas, right? So this is uh, you know, a user interface designed for software developers, interacting with ChatGPT. Okay, so as you can see from on the left side, it does a couple of explanation about the source code it generated for us, and then we can probably say ask it like, um, buddy, I want you to the solution. All right, so there. So I ask it, can you provide me with with the CLI command so that I can create the solution. All right, it's very handy, right? And so from there you can basically figure whether or not it is following the pattern that you are interested in using. So as you can see from here, it creates the project for the API. It also creates the project for the application layer, project for infrastructure, and also the project for the web API, right? And then on the left side, or sorry, on the right side, these are basically the syntax that it provided to us initially. But you can always ask it to to fix any problem that you see in on this generated code. So let's look at the sales order, for instance. So as you can see, it is using the repository layer directly, right? So we tell it use the service layer in the API layer. Is that a best practice? And then it's answered like using a service layer within the API layer is considered a best practice for clean architecture. The service layer encapsulates business logic and handles all domain related operations, promoting separation of concerns. Right. So there. So please tell it, correct the syntax. Okay, it says there, I updated the code to include sales order service in the application layer, which is then used in the API layer. So let's see if it actually uses the code in the sales order. So as you can see from here, it already fixed the problem, right? So the controller is already using the service layer, correct? And then you can continue the conversation with ChatGPT. And then if you are satisfied already with the base code that it generated for you, can basically copy and paste all of this in the project that you're going to create. So as you can remember, I asked it earlier, to give me the syntax so that I can simply run this under the command line. This is basically a CLI command, right? And then after creating all of that project, and can use your Visual Studio to open the solution and project, and just copy and paste all of this. And then you can continue, the thing here is whenever you are starting with a conversation with ChatGPT, do not ask a lot of things from it, right? You don't want to choke it. So you just ask some basic stuff for you, and then from there you can build, you know, uh, you can add more functionalities by asking it to improve on, the syntax that it created for you. You can start, let's say, you can start working on the sales order by adding all the functionalities based on the business rules, for instance, something like that. Okay, so that's how you can use ChatGPT, and obviously, you have to copy all the syntax created here into your into your project, for instance, in Visual Studio 2022 or Visual Studio Code. Okay, let me go back to my PowerPoint slide so we can wrap up this session. So let me summarize some of the key takeaways from using the ChatGPT in your development process. First, ChatGPT provides real-time in-depth code reviews if you want to, right? So you can ask it to review the code, or you can review the code with ChatGPT. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It helps identify potential issues, improving your code quality, and it can suggest best practices across your .NET and probably the Angular project. Every time you try to correct it, you ask it if your correction is based on best practices, because as you probably know, you know a lot of things in terms of clean architecture, and whenever it produces something for you, when you do the code review, you know that there's something is off with the code that it produces for you, and then you can just correct it so that it will produce the right syntax for you guys. So second, ChatGPT excels at debugging. You can provide a syntax. Let's say there's a problem with your project, and then you're having a hard time of fixing the bug. You can always paste the syntax on ChatGPT, and then it will help you analyze the code and give you the solution to the error. So for clean architecture project, ChatGPT offers intelligent recommendations on design pattern, like a repository pattern, dependency injection, ensuring that your application is scalable and maintainable, right? It also helps with performance optimization if you work with it in terms of troubleshooting how to optimize your existing code, suggesting ways to refactor or optimize both back-end and front-end code. It can do that for you. So in short, ChatGPT acts as an AI-powered mentor, helping you not just generate code, but also refine, optimize, and structure your projects effectively. So now that we have explored both GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT, let's talk about how these two tools can work together to supercharge your development workflow. So Copilot helps you generate code quickly by automating by auto-completing code snippets and creating boilerplate for both back-end and front-end tasks, right, or coding tasks. This can significantly speed up tasks like creating APIs or scaffolding Angular components, for instance. On the other hand, ChatGPT provides deep insights and refinement. So while Copilot generates code, ChatGPT can review the code, suggest improvements, and help resolve architectural questions like whether or not to implement, let's say, CQRS, or how to best structure your services in a clean architecture project. So for example, you might use Copilot to quickly create the sales order API, then switch to ChatGPT to review the implementation. And then it might suggest design improvements and even recommend better patterns for data handling or for performance optimization. So now let's try to go over some best practices when using GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT. Together, GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT can be a good set of tools for your workload or for your development project. First, it's important to trust, but you need to verify, right? So whenever you are writing something using the tools, you also need to verify if the syntax are correct, right? So what we that similar to what we did earlier, correct? So we fixed the repository layer, and then it generated the wrong code in the control, and then we fix it also, right? So by just telling it, it created wrong syntax for us. So while Copilot can generate code quickly, it's essential to always review the code for correctness, right? For performance and alignment with your project's architecture. This is where ChatGPT can provide valuable feedback. So if the Copilot produce something for you, you try to ask ChatGPT if the syntax are actually based on best practices, for instance. So use ChatGPT to validate your architecture and design patterns. So for instance, if Copilot generates a piece of code, you can ask ChatGPT if that code follows the right design pattern for your project's need, such as ensuring you're using CQRS or the repository pattern correctly. So make sure to integrate both tools into your iterative development cycle. So for instance, you can use Copilot to generate a feature that then immediately ask ChatGPT to review and refine it before proceeding to the next feature, right? And then leverage ChatGPT for optimization. So if your code is working but could be optimized for better performance, use ChatGPT. And then finally, always aim for clean and maintainable code. So while these AI tools are very powerful, the final responsibility rests on you to ensure the code is well organized and adheres to best practices for long-term maintainability. Again, don't just copy and paste, right? So you have to analyze, the syntax generated for you. So to wrap up, here are some of the practical advice on how you can integrate GitHub Copilot and and ChatGPT into your day-to-day development. Start by using Copilot for routine tasks such as generating boilerplate code, scaffolding and components, and handling repetitive coding patterns. And then for more complex tasks, you can use ChatGPT to handle code reviews, debugging, and architectural decisions. So whenever Copilot generates code, run it through ChatGPT, get a second opinion on best practices. patterns, or even performance optimization. Right? So start with smaller features or projects when introducing these tools, and gradually scale up to more complex projects as you become comfortable with how ChatGPT and Copilot work for you and how they gonna assist you in your development effort. All right, so that would end my presentation. I'm going to open the floor for for Q&A, if any.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Alan, for that insightful presentation. Guys, let's show our appreciation to Sir Alan by clicking the reaction button, please. Wow, ang daming heart, sir. Ang daming heart. Ang daming nagustuhan po sa demong ginawa ninyo. So now
Thank
we
you.
have some questions for you from the audience. Let's start with Miss Danica. What should developers watch out for when using this Copilot? How do we check insecure codes?
Insecure codes. Yeah, I think that's a good question. So, as you can see, I do not really rely on Copilot to to just produce the code and then copy and paste, right? So, I usually check every lines of code that is written by Copilot to make sure that they, you know, comply with best practices, including best practices for secure code. Correct. So, let's say you're producing code for, let's say, for SQL. So you have to check whether or not it produces a code that would allow hack in your database, for instance, right? So you have to check for that also. And also secure code, probably you want to make sure you want to make sure that your api is well protected. So make sure you are using the right token, for instance, two-factor authentication in your code, etc. So it's really up for you to really review the lines of code that are generated by ChatGPT and make sure that they are not only maintainable but are also secure.
All right. I hope that answered your questions, Miss Danica. And we also have another one from Christian. How can we use AI tools in coding without developers becoming too dependent on them while keeping their hands-on familiarity with the code?
That's a very, very good question. Okay. Um, I understand when you start when you start depending on ChatGPT, it basically prevents you for thinking, right, about certain things in terms of coding. So my suggestion is always you always try to use certain references. I believe, like you need to have a book about clean architecture, for instance. You have a book about programming, and then even if you are using these tools to to speed up things, you still need to practice coding, so that the we call it muscle memory, right? So you have to make sure that your muscle memory is still there. So even if you are using this tool, you still understand how to identify errors in the code, or if there are code that are written there that are not supposed to be there. So you still really need to help yourself in terms of getting a good understanding of how to write code, right? How to understand clean architecture, etc. So do not depend entirely on the tools. You have to know how to review the code. And a couple of days back, I read in one of the news articles here that eventually companies would be hiring more senior guys doing code review of all of this source code created by AI tools.
All right. Thank you for that, sir. And I hope that's answered your question, Christian. Another one from Miss Diane. How do you make sure that libraries imported used in code generated by Copilot have no vulnerabilities?
Yeah, that's another good question. So I think that is also applicable whenever you are using libraries for JavaScript framework, like for instance, Angular or React, for instance. Whenever you are installing all of that framework, as suggested by ChatGPT or Copilot, there's a way for you to audit those libraries, right? So it will tell you whether or not a particular library has, let's say, vulnerabilities. So all you need to do, if the tool suggests you to use them, make sure you also audit those libraries to make sure that they are not vulnerable. They would not create vulnerabilities in your application. So similar to any other stuff that you install manually in your project, you have to audit them.
Thank you, sir. And another one from ISA. Given our organization's specific industry and regulatory requirements, what are the potential legal or compliance implications of using AI-powered tools for software development?
My answer there is do not use them yet until you get a go signal from from the right authorities, because one of the uh, one of the issues that they will raise is security, privacy, etc., right? So before you even introduce or use those tools in your development environment, you have to get a clearance. So if your company is regulated by let's say it's a central bank regulated companies, and they do not allow any organization to use AI powered tools for software development, you cannot use them, right? So you need to get a clearance first. That's a good question.
All right. For our last question, coming from someone anonymous. Would you recommend using GitHub Copilot if your code base contains many exposed secrets, such as credentials and API keys, or should this be cleaned up first before starting to use GitHub Copilot?
Yeah, that's why I said earlier, do not let GitHub Copilot to edit your source code directly, right? So that there's a situation wherein you need to clean up first your code before you provide GitHub with the Copilot with how to write the additional code for that particular file, for instance. And therefore, make sure that all of those secrets are not provided to GitHub Copilot. So you don't want them to basically save your data, your private data. Always clean up your data before you ask them to edit your, or before you ask them to generate your code for you. And again, do not let them, based on my experience, I'm not letting GitHub Copilot to edit directly my file. I always chat with the GitHub Copilot and then just copy paste if I need to. But it's very powerful in terms of avoiding writing those repetitive code. Like for instance in EF, there's a lot of repetitive code there which you could avoid doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Sir Alan, for answering the questions. Now, guys, alam ko madami pa kayong tanong, pero we're running out of time. Pero yun nga, please feel free to chat with our speaker on our Meet. And that's all the time we have for this session. If you enjoyed this session, please give your rating and share your feedback about our speaker. You'll find the link in the chat box. So again, let's thank Sir Alan by clicking on the heart or clapping emojis.
Thank you.
Ayan.
Thank you,
So,
guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.
please exit this session and click on to the next. Bye, guys.
Bye bye.